Asterisk the rain drummed against the kitchen window as Margaret Whitmore sat at her oak dining table, her weathered hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. At 67, she had seen enough storms, both literal and metaphorical, to last several lifetimes. But nothing had prepared her for the tempest that awaited her when she returned home from her 6-month rehabilitation program. Asterisk go rot back in rehab. Dorothy had spat, her daughter-in-law's voice dripping with venom. You don't belong here anymore. Asterisk Margaret's heart had shattered into 1,000 pieces that cold October morning. After 35 years of marriage to Henry, after raising 3 children in this very house, after surviving her husband's sudden death 2 years prior, this was how she was welcomed home. By the woman who had married her youngest son, Robert. Asterisk, but Margaret Whitmore was made of sterner stuff than Dorothy imagined. And what happened next would change everything. Asterisk, it had started innocently enough. After Henry's funeral, Margaret found herself reaching for his old bottle of bourbon more frequently. Just a small glass to help her sleep, she told herself. It's just something to numb the ache that seemed to consume her chest every waking moment. Asterisk mother. You've been drinking, Robert had said during one of his visits. His concerned brown eyes, so much like his father's, searched her face. Maybe you should talk to someone. Asterisk nonsense, Margaret had replied, straightening her shoulders. I'm managing just fine. Asterisk, but she wasn't managing fine. The small glass became 2 glasses, then 3. The evening drinks crept into afternoon, then morning. Before she knew it, Margaret was starting her day with a shot of courage and ending it unconscious on the living room sofa. Asterisk. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in April. Margaret had fallen down the front porch steps, scraping her knee and bruising her pride. Mrs. Henderson from next door had found her there, confused and unable to get up on her own. Asterisk Margaret, dear, the elderly neighbor had said gently. I think it's time to call Robert. Asterisk that night, as Margaret sat in the emergency room getting her knee stitched up, she saw the fear in her son's eyes. The shame nearly consumed her. Asterisk, I found a place, Mother, Robert had said quietly. It's called Willowbrook Recovery Center. They specialize in helping people our age. Asterisk Margaret wanted to protest to maintain her dignity, but the fight had gone out of her. She was 75 pounds lighter than she'd been a year ago. Her silver hair had grown thin and lifeless, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd cooked a proper meal. Asterisk, all right, she whispered. I'll go. Asterisk, 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 if you're finding value in Margaret's story, please consider joining our community by clicking that subscribe button below. Your support helps us share more inspiring stories like this one. Asterisk, 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 Willowbrook Recovery Center sat nestled in the rolling hills of Vermont, surrounded by maple trees that turned brilliant shades of gold and crimson in the autumn. Margaret arrived there on a September morning, clutching a small suitcase and what remained of her pride. Asterisk the first few weeks were torture. The withdrawal made her body ache, her hands shake, and her mind foggy. But slowly, with the help of Dr. Patricia Williams and the other residents, Margaret began to piece herself back together. Asterisk. Tell me about Henry, Dr. Williams said during one of their sessions. What was he like? Asterisk. Margaret's eyes filled with tears as she spoke about her husband of 35 years. Henry had been her anchor, her best friend, her reason for getting up each morning. When he died suddenly of a heart attack, Margaret felt as though half of her soul had been ripped away. Asterisk. I didn't know how to be without him, she admitted. We did everything together, made every decision together. I'd never lived alone in my entire life. Asterisk. Grief is a process, Margaret, Dr. Williams said gently. But drowning it in alcohol only delays the healing. You have to learn to carry it, not bury it. Asterisk. Over the months, Margaret learned to carry her grief differently. She attended group therapy sessions, learned coping mechanisms, and slowly began to rediscover the strong woman she'd been before alcohol became her crutch. Asterisk. She made friends with Eleanor, a retired teacher who'd lost her husband to cancer. And with Frank, a widowed carpenter who'd turned to drink after his wife's death. Together, they supported each other through the darkest days and celebrated the small victories. Asterisk, you know. Eleanor said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, "I think we're stronger than we ever imagined." Asterisk Margaret nodded, feeling something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope, asterisk, after 6 months at Willowbrook. Margaret was ready to return home. She'd gained back 20 pounds. Her silver hair was styled and healthy again, and her green eyes sparkled with renewed life. She'd learned to cook again, to manage her finances, to live independently without relying on alcohol to numb her pain. Asterisk Robert picked her up on a crisp October morning, and Margaret felt excitement bubbling in her chest as they drove toward the old colonial house she'd called home for 4 decades. Asterisk Dorothy's been helping take care of the house, Robert mentioned as they pulled into the driveway. She's been staying there quite a bit. Asterisk Margaret noticed the subtle changes immediately. The flower beds she'd carefully tended were overgrown with weeds. The front porch, where she and Henry used to sit and watch the sunset, was cluttered with boxes and furniture that didn't belong to her. Asterisk inside the house felt foreign. Dorothy had rearranged the furniture, packed away Margaret's photographs and knickknacks, and filled the rooms with her own belongings. The kitchen counters were covered with Dorothy's ceramic roosters, and the living room mantel where Margaret's wedding photo with Henry had sat for 35 years now displayed Dorothy and Robert's wedding portrait. Asterisk, what is all this? Margaret asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Asterisk Dorothy emerged from the kitchen, her arms crossed defensively. At 38, she was a sharp-featured woman with ambitious eyes and a calculating smile. She'd married Robert 5 years ago, and Margaret had never quite warmed to her, though she'd tried for her son's sake. Asterisk, "Oh, you're back," Dorothy said, her tone flat. "I wasn't sure you were coming back." Asterisk, "Of course, I'm back," Margaret replied, setting down her suitcase. "This is my home." Asterisk Dorothy's laugh was cold and bitter. "Your home? You mean the home you nearly destroyed with your drinking? The home where the neighbors found you passed out on the porch?" Asterisk Margaret felt her cheeks burn with shame, but she stood her ground. "I've been sober for 6 months, Dorothy. I'm better now." Asterisk, "Are you?" Dorothy moved closer, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Because I don't think you are. I think you're just one bad day away from falling off the wagon again. And I won't let you drag my husband down with you." Asterisk Dorothy, "That's enough," Robert said firmly, but his wife wasn't finished. Asterisk Go rot back in rehab. Dorothy spat, her mask of civility finally slipping away. "You don't belong here anymore. It's this house. This family we've moved on without you." Asterisk, the words hit Margaret like physical blows. She looked around the room, her home, and saw how thoroughly Dorothy had erased her presence. It was as if 35 years of marriage, of raising children, of building a life had been swept away like dust. Asterisk, but as Margaret stood there, absorbing the cruelty of Dorothy's words, something unexpected happened. Instead of reaching for a bottle, she felt a familiar strength rising within her. It was the same strength that had carried her through childbirth, through Henry's illness, through her own recovery. It was the strength of a woman who had survived too much to be broken by someone else's small-minded cruelty. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to never miss our inspiring stories of resilience and triumph. Asterisk that night, Margaret stayed in a hotel room, her mind racing with hurt and anger. But as the hours passed, her emotions crystallized into something more powerful: determination. She would not be driven from her own home by Dorothy's selfishness. Asterisk the next morning, Margaret returned to the house while Dorothy was at work. She needed to collect some personal items and figure out her next move. As she walked through the rooms, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Asterisk in Henry's old study, which Dorothy had converted into a home office, Margaret found stacks of documents and files. Curious, she began to examine them more closely. What she discovered made her hands tremble, but not from withdrawal this time. Asterisk Dorothy, been systematically transferring ownership of Margaret's assets into her own name. The house deed had been changed, listing Dorothy as the primary owner with Robert as co-owner. Margaret's name had been removed entirely. Her bank accounts had been consolidated under Dorothy's control, with Margaret listed as a dependent. Her late husband's pension benefits had been redirected to Dorothy's accounts. Asterisk Margaret sat down heavily in Henry's old chair, her mind reeling. While she'd been away getting help, Dorothy had been stealing her life piece by piece. The legal documents showed that Dorothy had obtained power of attorney over Margaret's affairs, claiming she was mentally incompetent due to her alcoholism. But Margaret wasn't incompetent. She was a woman who had run a household for 35 years, raised 3 children, and managed the family finances, while Henry focused on his career as a civil engineer. She'd organized church fundraisers, volunteered at the local hospital, and maintained friendships that spanned decades. Margaret photographed every document with her phone, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what she'd discovered. Then she carefully returned everything to its place and left the house. Her first stop was the office of Jonathan Hartwell, the family lawyer who'd handled Henry's estate. Jonathan was a distinguished man in his 60s who'd known the Whitmore family for 20 years. Margaret, he said warmly as she entered his office. I heard you were away getting help. How are you feeling? Much better. Thank you, Margaret replied, settling into the chair across from his desk. But I'm afraid I need your help with a legal matter. She showed him the photographs she'd taken, watching his expression grow more serious with each image. I'm afraid Dorothy has overstepped her bounds. Jonathan said finally, these documents, some of them appear to be fraudulent. She couldn't have legally transferred ownership of your home without your explicit consent. And she certainly couldn't have removed your name from accounts that were established in your name. What can we do? Margaret asked. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. We can do quite a lot, actually. First, we'll need to file a police report for financial fraud. Then we'll need to reverse all these unauthorized transfers. It won't be easy and it won't be quick, but we can fix this. Margaret felt a wave of relief wash over her. Thank you, Jonathan. I was beginning to think I was going crazy. You're not crazy, Margaret. You're the victim of a carefully orchestrated scheme. But Dorothy made one crucial mistake. She underestimated you. Armed with legal documents and Jonathan's support, Margaret returned home the next day. Dorothy was in the kitchen preparing lunch when Margaret walked through the front door. I thought I told you to leave, Dorothy said without looking up from her sandwich. Actually, you told me to rot back in rehab, Margaret replied calmly. But since this is my house, I think I'll stay. Dorothy turned around, her face flushed with anger. Your house? I have the deed right here that says otherwise. You mean the fraudulent deed that you created without my knowledge or consent? Margaret asked, pulling out the folder of legal documents. The one that Jonathan Hartwell says is legally invalid. Dorothy's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you do, Margaret said, her voice steady and strong. You thought you could steal my life while I was away getting help. You thought I was too weak, too broken to fight back. But you were wrong, Dorothy. I'm stronger than you ever imagined. Margaret set the papers on the kitchen counter. These are court documents. The police will be here within the hour to question you about financial fraud and elder abuse. Every account you've transferred, every document you've forged, every penny you've stolen, it's all going to be returned to me. Dorothy's composure cracked completely. You can't prove anything. I was protecting Robert's inheritance. Asterisk from whom? Margaret asked. It's from his own mother. It's a woman who raised him and loved him unconditionally. Asterisk, you're an alcoholic. Dorothy screamed. You could have lost everything. Asterisk, I might have been an alcoholic, Margaret said quietly, but I was never a thief. I never stole from family, never betrayed the people who trusted me. Asterisk, the sound of car doors slamming outside announced the arrival of the police. Margaret walked to the front door and opened it, greeting the officers with a dignity that surprised even herself. Asterisk, officers, thank you for coming. I'm Margaret Whitmore, and I believe I'm the victim of financial fraud and elder abuse. Asterisk, 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 if. You're inspired by Margaret's courage to stand up for herself. Please subscribe to our channel and share this story with others who might need to hear it. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The investigation that followed was thorough and swift. Dorothy had been sloppy in her fraudulent activities, leaving a clear paper trail that investigators easily followed. Within 2 weeks, all of Margaret's accounts had been restored. The house deed had been corrected, and Dorothy faced multiple felony charges. Asterisk Robert was devastated when he learned the truth. He'd known nothing about his wife's activities, and the betrayal cut him deeply. Asterisk, I'm so sorry, Mother, he said, tears streaming down his face as they sat in Margaret's restored living room. I should have protected you. Asterisk, you couldn't have known, Margaret replied, reaching over to squeeze his hand. Dorothy was very careful to hide what she was doing. Asterisk, but I should have been there for you, Robert insisted. When you were drinking, when you needed help, I should have been more involved. Asterisk Margaret smiled sadly. Oh, my dear boy, you were involved. You got me the help I needed. You saved my life by getting me to Willowbrook. Asterisk, and then I let my wife steal it back from you. Asterisk, no, Margaret said firmly. You let your wife try too. Steal it. But she didn't succeed. I'm still here, I'm still sober, and I'm still your mother. Nothing she did changes that. Asterisk Robert filed for divorce the following week. The betrayal of his mother had opened his eyes to aspects of Dorothy's character he'd chosen to ignore. Margaret supported his decision, though she grieved for the pain it caused him. 6 months later, Margaret stood in her garden planting bulbs for the spring. The house was truly hers again, filled with her photographs, her memories, and her spirit. She'd lost 20 pounds during the ordeal. But Dr. Williams assured her that was normal. Stress affected everyone differently. Asterisk Eleanor from Willowbrook came to visit regularly, and they'd formed a friendship that sustained them both. Frank had also become a regular visitor, and Margaret found herself looking forward to his company more than she'd expected. Asterisk, you know, Eleanor said one afternoon as they sat on the porch drinking tea. I think what Dorothy did was the best thing that could have happened to you. Asterisk Margaret raised an eyebrow. How can you say that? Asterisk, because it proved to you that you're not the broken woman you thought you were, Eleanor replied. You're a warrior, Margaret. You always were. You just forgot for a while. Asterisk Margaret considered this as she watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Eleanor was right. The old Margaret, the one who'd married Henry at 22 and never lived alone, might have been destroyed by Dorothy's betrayal, but the new Margaret, the one who'd learned to carry her grief and live with her pain, was stronger than she'd ever imagined. Asterisk Robert visited regularly, slowly rebuilding his relationship with his mother. He'd learned valuable lessons about trust and loyalty. And Margaret was proud of the man he was becoming in the aftermath of his divorce. Asterisk, I've been thinking about traveling, Margaret told him one evening over dinner. Eleanor and I want to take a trip to Ireland. We've both got Irish heritage, and we thought it might be nice to explore it together. Asterisk Robert smiled. I think that's a wonderful idea, Mother. When do you leave? Asterisk, next month, Margaret replied. We're flying into Dublin and then renting a car to drive around the countryside. Asterisk, just the two of you. Asterisk, Margaret's eyes twinkled. Well, Frank might join us for part of the trip. He's got family in Cork. Asterisk Robert laughed. Mother, are you telling me you have a boyfriend? Asterisk, I'm telling you, I have a very good friend who makes me laugh. Margaret replied, at my age, that's more valuable than you might think. Asterisk, as Margaret prepared for her trip to Ireland, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The drinking had been her way of avoiding the pain of losing Henry, but it had also been a way of avoiding life itself. Recovery hadn't just meant giving up alcohol, it had meant learning to live fully again. Asterisk. And did you, Dr. Williams asked, lose yourself? Asterisk. Margaret paused, considering the question. For a while, yes. But I found myself again, and the woman I found was stronger than the one I'd lost. Asterisk. On the night before her departure for Ireland, Margaret sat in Henry's old chair in the study, writing in the journal she'd started keeping at Willowbrook. The words flowed easily now, filled with hope and possibility rather than pain and regret. Asterisk. Dear Henry, she wrote, I'm learning to live without you, but I'm not learning to forget you. I carry you with me in every decision I make, every joy I experience, every challenge I face. I think you'd be proud of the woman I've become. I think you'd be proud that I didn't let Dorothy's cruelty break me. Asterisk. I'm leaving for Ireland tomorrow, and I'm scared and excited in equal measure. But I'm also grateful for the pain that taught me my own strength, grateful for the betrayal that showed me my own worth, grateful for the journey that brought me back to myself. Asterisk. I love you always and forever. But I'm also learning to love myself again, and I think that's what you'd want most of all. Asterisk. Margaret closed the journal and looked around the study, her study now, filled with her books and her dreams. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, new opportunities to discover just how strong she really was, and she couldn't wait to find out. 2 years later, Margaret stood before a group of women at the Willowbrook Recovery Center, sharing her story of betrayal, recovery, and triumph. Her silver hair was styled elegantly, her green eyes bright with wisdom and compassion. Asterisk. The hardest part, she told the group, wasn't giving up drinking. It was learning to believe in myself again, learning that I was worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth loving. Asterisk. One of the women raised her hand. How do you deal with the shame, the guilt of what you put your family through? Asterisk. Margaret smiled. Gently, I made amends where I could, and I forgave myself for the rest. Shame is a luxury I can't afford anymore. I'm too busy living to waste time on regret. Asterisk. Another woman asked, what would you say to someone who's facing betrayal from their own family? Asterisk. I'd say that family isn't just about blood. Margaret replied, it's about loyalty, love, and respect. If someone betrays those things, they've betrayed the very essence of family. But that doesn't mean you have to let them destroy you. You have the power to choose your own family, to surround yourself with people who see your worth and honor. Asterisk. As the session ended, Margaret felt a familiar warmth in her chest. This was her purpose, now helping other women find their strength, their voice, their worth. Dorothy's betrayal had taught her that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. And now she was passing that lesson on to others. Asterisk. Frank was waiting for her in the parking lot, his kind eyes crinkling with affection as she approached. Asterisk. How did it go? He asked, opening the car door for her. Asterisk. Wonderfully, Margaret replied. I think I helped a few women realize they're stronger than they think. Asterisk. Just like someone once helped you realize the same thing, Frank said, settling into the driver's seat. Asterisk. Margaret smiled as they drove away from Willowbrook, the place that had given her back her life. She thought about the woman who'd arrived there 2 years ago, broken, ashamed, defeated. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone who knew her own worth and refused to let anyone diminish it. Asterisk. The road ahead stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise. And Margaret Whitmore, survivor of addiction, betrayal, and heartbreak, was ready for whatever came next. Asterisk. After all, she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. Asterisk.